Moving right along, objective number 3. Did you notice that I broke my finger? This is an exercise in make sure you go to the doctor when you break a bone, because I had broken this a week ago. It got really infected and it was all messed up and I had to go to 2 doctors and it totally sucked. But now I'm getting decent treatment, so everything's cool. Got to take care of those medical problems, even though it costs a lot. Okay, anyway, back to sharing my screen, and I am on objective 3 here. Okay, and I'm going to talk about the best practices for creating valid manipulation. So here we're talking about the independent variable and how do we split up groups and make those independent variables be sure to produce effects. Okay, so I'll talk about that. Okay, so one thing for your manipulation there is you're going to want to make sure that you make your manipulation strong. So let's go back to Mr. Pumpkinhead, who thinks that brownies increase his concentration. And we're creating this experimental design where we take 100 people and we split them up into a group that eats brownies and a group that doesn't eat brownies, and then we test their concentration on their schoolwork. Well, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for the group who eats brownies to just eat like 1 bite of brownies versus the other group doesn't eat any brownies, right? We want those groups to be as different as possible. So I think the best thing would be, in this case, to have that group eat like at least 2 or 3 brownies. This group doesn't eat any brownies. So there we get a bigger separation. So we don't want the groups to be too close together. We want them to be separated out. So if you had a manipulation, let's say, of exercise, we would want the group to exercise for, say, an hour a day. We wouldn't want them to exercise for 15 minutes a day versus a control group who exercises for nothing. We'd want to make sure the groups are pretty different there. Next, we want to encourage experimental realism. We want to make sure that the participants take this study seriously and really engage themselves in the task. We want to make sure that the people are actually eating the brownies, right? Or they're really exercising for that hour a day. So we want to really make them feel like this is real. We want them to do it. We want to really encourage them, and that helps. And then finally, we want to check whether the independent variable had the intended effect. And I'm using a different example here, so let me talk about that. It was an experiment I did a while back to see if prayer before a test increases your test grades, right? And so we had randomly assigned people to either pray before a test or not pray before the test. And the idea is that the group who prayed, their anxiety would go down and they would do a little bit better on the test for lack of test anxiety. And so at any rate, prior to the test, we told some people to pray and other people were not told anything. So we had an experimental group and a control group. Now, the thing is, because it was silent prayer, we couldn't tell if they prayed or not. And so what we did is we asked them at the end of the experiment, we did what's called a manipulation check. We asked them, did you pray? And the control group, if they said, we prayed, and the experimental group said, yes, we prayed, and the control group said, no, we did not pray, then we know that the manipulation had the intended effect. So you would do that after the manipulation just to make sure they did it, And so you'd ask people, for example, did you eat the brownies? Did you exercise? You know what I'm saying? To make sure that they did what you asked them to do. And that's called a manipulation check. Okay, I want to go through a little manipulation exercise, and we'll go through these. And again, if you can do it on your own, do it on your own. Stop it and see what happens there. So for each question, what is the independent variable and how should it be manipulated? So researchers investigated whether or not hormones influences the amount of milk a dairy cow produces. Well, if hormones are causing milk production, right? Then the cause is going this way. The independent variable is the cause and the dependent variable is the effect. Therefore, the independent variable is the hormones. Would you want to give them a little bit of hormones or would you want to give them a lot of hormones? Well, we would want to make that manipulation strong. We would want to give them a lot of hormones. We would want to make sure they actually get the hormones, right? Okay, next, researchers tested the impact of sleep deprivation on driving ability. The independent variable there is sleep deprivation because it's the cause. How would you want to manipulate it? Would you want to deprive them of 1 hour? Heck no. You would want to make sure that your experimental group is as different as possible as a control group. We don't want them to be exactly the same. So we want to make sure that one group gets seriously sleep deprived, the other group does not. And then we would want to make sure that they were actually sleep deprived. So we would want to do a manipulation check on that. We would want to make sure they were taking it very seriously. Researchers examined whether the success of football players depended on the type of coaching they received. There, the coaching causes success. So coaching is the independent variable. Football success is the dependent variable. And we would want to make sure those two coaching styles are as different as possible. Researchers tested whether belonging to clubs and organizations improves grade point average. Clubs and organizations are the independent variable. Grade point average is the dependent variable there. And again, we would want those groups to be spread out as much as possible. We would want to make sure that the control group did not participate in any clubs or organizations, but that the experimental group did, and they spent some time in those clubs and organizations, and we made sure that in fact they actually did it. All right. I'm going to go on to objective 4 in the next video.